everybody, Spencer here, talking all about everything you need to know regarding Persona 5 Strikers, or formerly known as Persona 5 Scramble in Japan. So, if anyone here is a longtime Persona fan, or even just a Koei Tecmo fan, you know as well as I do that Persona 5 Scramble has had a very long journey to releasing in the West, and finally, we are almost here. We are now less than 2 months away from Persona 5 Strikers releasing on February 19th for those pre-ordering the Digital Deluxe Edition, or if you want to wait for that nice physical copy and possibly a bonus steelbook, you're going to have to wait an extra 4 days and play the game on February 23rd, 2021. Still, all things considered, whether you are someone who is going to be playing it on PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Switch, or the PC, this video is basically here to help kind of answer or hopefully quell any of your worries you might have going into the game. So, Strikers is a really interesting title for the series, not only because it is developed outside of P Studios, not only because it's a follow-up to Persona 5, it is a really interesting kind of mixture of different genres, even as far as Koei Tecmo games are concerned. So, let's say if you're an Atlas fan and you've only played Persona 5, you might only know Koei Tecmo through stuff like Dynasty Warriors, Samurai Warriors, Dead or Alive, or even some of their RPGs from Gus. So, Koei Tecmo is very familiar with working and collaborating with tons and tons of different companies. They just released Age of Calamity worldwide last year with Nintendo. They helped make Dragon Quest Builders 2. They even did a large amount of the development work for Fire Emblem Three Houses, which most people don't even know was really made by Koei Tecmo. So the studio is definitely used to collaborating with other IPs and kind of putting their own spin on it. But what's so interesting about Strikers is that most people definitely sort of thought, and even still to this day, think that the game is nothing more than a Warriors or a Musou-like, which obviously is made by Omega Force, who are the same developers who do all the Warriors games, but as soon as you actually get your hands on this game, what makes it immediately stand out as so different is it's not about fighting hundreds. Like, yes, there are moments in the game where you'll be fighting large hordes, but a large amount of that game is still you going and acting like the Phantom Thieves in a way that doesn't really feel out of place for them. You're fighting small groups of enemies. You can sneak up and get an advantage on the enemy, or the enemy can actually get the upper hand on you, putting you in a less than favorable position. So basically the first thing I want to say, outside of it, just really cannot make this any more clear, Persona 5 Strikers is not a Warriors game. There's a reason even in Japan it's not called Persona Musou. This is made by the same developers, but what really stands out for it is as soon as you start playing the game, it really goes out of its way to feel like you're playing Persona 5, just as a more of an action RPG twist as opposed to a turn-based RPG. You still have your basic movements, you still are going in and out of the metaverse. Obviously, the engine is a little bit different, but while there are some aspects, like maybe Ryuji's hair, or certain level of details in the world or the characters might be a little different compared to Persona 5, Royal, or even Dancing, what I thought is so interesting about it is I actually, over time, have really grown to love the art style through my playthrough of the Japanese version of this game. I think it has a really interesting charm and just visual look to it, and what really always just kept amazing me through my entire time playing it on PlayStation 4 is just how smooth and beautiful this thing looks at 4K and playing in 60 FPS. So obviously if you're playing on Nintendo Switch, you're going to be locked at around 30, but obviously it's going to buckle on some of those more heavy moments. Playing it docked, it's going to be at 1080. Playing it in portable and handheld, it's going to be in 720p, but it is still more than playable. It is not the optimal way to play it, but if you're someone who enjoys playing their games on Switch, you are not getting a lesser product. That is the whole game, and the entire experience is there, portable only on the Switch, which is special in its own right. So for PlayStation 4, 5, and PC players, though, you have a lot more freedom in terms of graphical fidelity, ranging from 1080p to upscaled 4K. The game technically is really special, and what I mean by that is that even while playing on a base PlayStation 4, I was so impressed by how often it was able to stick to 1080p, 60, and on PlayStation 4 Pro, even at that upscaled trying to be 4K, it held 60 pretty well, even though it would dip sometimes. What I think is going to be really special is for those people who own a PlayStation 5 playing it on backwards compatibility, or someone playing it on a higher-end PC, is that this game running in upscaled 4K and 60 locked on those systems, it just feels really, really smooth in a way that like you've never really got to experience with most Atlas games. Obviously, not a lot of them are really tailored to that next-gen kind of 4K 60 experience, but playing an action game at 60 FPS, having the visual fidelity of this game, even though obviously the textures are not like the most, like, they're not going to like blow your mind like something like a Demon's Souls or even like a Miles Morales, it definitely has its charm in its own visual style, which I really, really appreciated Koei Tecmo going out of their way to make this game run so well if you have that higher end hardware. So, well, I think it's awesome that people on Switch are going to be able to play the game, enjoy it portably, and get a decent enough experience. If you have those higher end systems, even if you are someone who might be like really big into Switch, I cannot recommend enough just at least trying this game on PC, PS4, or PS5. So that is enough technical mumbo-jumbo. The game runs really, really well. You know what you're getting into with that. But for gameplay, as I mentioned, Persona 5 Strikers is an action RPG. But that doesn't mean that it's skimping on the social elements. Now, obviously, this is not going to be a game where you're going to be going through a calendar, days counting like that. While there is a calendar system, it's definitely more to show the progression of the story. And this video, I'm not really going to get into the story much more than this, in the sense of Persona 5 Strikers' story. The simplest, most spoiler-free way I can say is it takes place the summer after Persona 5 or Persona 5 Royal. I've had a lot of people ask me, well, is this canon to Royal? Is it canon to Vanilla? Like, how does it really work? The way the story is told, as I mentioned, not spoiling anything for any of these games, it is definitely, like, it can work with anything, and I wouldn't be, like, that concerned. The only real major things that are going to stand out to you is there's no Akechi, there's no Kasumi, and there's no Maruki. So while those major characters aren't going to appear in Strikers, the new cast of characters such as Sophie and Zenkichi are really, really, really big standouts. So the whole point of the story, if you wanted to summarize it as quickly as possible, the Phantom Thieves are reuniting, and they are doing basically a vacation / road trip all across Japan, and as they're going to all these different cities and locales, different events are happening, they have to stop them, yada yada yada, fun times ensue, and I have to be honest with everyone here. Now, I'm going off of this experience of beating the Japanese version, but as someone who played Persona 5 and Persona 5 Royal back-to-back in 2020, my opinion on the story was very, very high. It did not ever feel like an afterthought. This was definitely a story-heavy game, and I just really have to applaud the developers who worked on this for not only making it look like a Persona game, not only making it feel like a good action game, but actually feeling like it is a true continuation. It didn't feel like a half-assed, try to shoehorn in some canon, but really they're all dreaming thing. Because if anyone here has ever played a Persona spin-off, or basically anything that's not a mainline title, the way that they try to connect it in with their base games are usually pretty lackluster and something that we try to forget about. So, that's enough about story. As I mentioned, very story-heavy game. I don't want to spoil anything. I want you all to enjoy it when it comes out in February. Let's talk a little bit about the gameplay flow. So, as I mentioned, the calendar system is gone. Basically, when you're not in the metaverse, you can walk around town, check out shops, and talk to your friends, progress the story that way, but a majority of your time is going to be spent in the metaverse. And instead of going to palaces, in this game they are called jails. So jails are basically the same thing. You're in the metaverse, you're trying to take down either someone or something's twisted desires, and that locale's villain is just kind of tied to it. So it's almost actually kind of like those Monster of the Week shows where everything feels very self-contained to that story and the location with the characters there, which I really appreciate, while slowly progressing the overall plot of the whole story. So, once you are inside of these jails, one of the most fun aspects for me personally of playing Strikers is the fact that not only are you making your parties like in normal Persona 5, you can select 4 party members, Joker always has to be present. You can also play as Ryuji, Ann, Morgana, Yusuke, Makoto, Haru, Sophie, and eventually Zenkichi is playable as well. And what I loved about this is one of the things that I always find the most enjoyable from new Warriors titles, especially something I've noticed, it's really funny, like a lot of the Dynasty Warrior games really pride themselves, especially something like Warriors Orochi. They're like, we've got like 170 characters, check them out, but when you have a character roster that large, it's really hard to make each and every one feel special, and leveling them up to feel really gratifying And what's nice about this cast being so small, even with the 2 extra members added to the Phantom Thieves, what's so funny about it is everyone just plays so differently that, like, there's nothing I can really compare to each character's playstyle. Ryuji is very heavy. He uses his thunder, and his attacks are really, really widespread. His shotgun is just so satisfying to use. But then comparing it to someone like Yusuke is basically just Virgil with ice moves, and that is nothing but the highest compliment in my regard. Haru is an absolute tank. She and her grenade launcher, mixing with like all the guns and power she has with her persona, all come together and just basically make her an AoE machine. And all the characters, like, I can go on, like, there was never one character I was playing as where I was like, oh, they're okay. Like, there's no boring character. Even someone who, like, I might not be the biggest fan of in terms of the story, they're still fun to play as, which is really, really great. And the nice thing is, all the characters, with the exception of Zenkichi, are playable right off the bat. So once you're out of the tutorial section and you are into that first jail, you can just switch them out at any moment, and it's really, really fun because the combat is definitely smaller scale, but when you're getting into these fights, whether it be with a horde of smaller enemies going against a boss fight, or even just a mix of the two, you'll notice that those persona systems are still there in terms of using like baton passes, whether it be one mores, taking advantage of critical hits or all-out attacks. And so systems like that, I was really, really impressed by how they implemented, because the speed is just so fun of like, yeah, you can just play as one character and pretty much dodge your way out of attacks, and whether you want to over-level one person or level up everyone at the same time, multiple kind of playstyles are really, really fitted to this game. There's not one correct way to play. There's not like, oh, you don't have blank in your party? Okay, you're going to have a bad time. So that's another really, really great thing. It is an open experience in terms of free-flow combat. There are different ways to kind of tailor-make it to yourself, whether it be what kind of personas you want to use as Joker, because Joker obviously is the only one in the cast who can hold multiple personas in battle. So one of the interesting things about personas is the way they work is, obviously with your characters, you can use your gun, you can jump, you have a special attack, there's a light attack, there's a heavy attack, you can mix those things up. But when you want to use your persona, you basically hold down a button and it gives you your list of skills. Your skills, obviously, if they're passive, they're not going to appear, but you have all your different stuff that you've selected. When they level up, you can change out different skills, and when you're fusing new personas, you can put new skills there. You can use skill cards. It's just like the game, and in that sense, I really, really appreciated the fact that even though it stops combat and brings time to a hold, when you bring your persona out, it's nice to kind of like know that you can always hold that button down, summon your persona, and just kind of take that breather and analyze your opponent, whether it be a mid-boss or even one of the larger bosses, and kind of just assess the situation like that. So it's really, really nice that you have that freedom. Obviously, since Joker can hold multiple personas, he can either get personas through battle, or you can go to the Velvet Room. It's just like in the main game. You can fuse personas, you can sell personas. There are all the systems there that you need to basically expand your roster. It is still an action game at its heart, but there are still dozens and dozens and dozens of personas that you can unlock, fuse, and just really go wild in terms of how you want your playstyle to be. And what's really, really nice is there was never a moment where I was like, oh, okay, they just took all of the Persona 5 demons, put their models in here, and they're all basically going to act the same. Like, even just little touches like Joker's special attack, depending on which persona he has active, it's not just going to be the same kind of animation. Each of the demons animate a little differently. So, at the end of the day, yeah, the attack's doing the same kind of damage, but let's say if you're using Arson, or if you're using Pixie, or if you're using Jack Frost, those are going to look different, and it's nice that you're not just seeing the same attack over and over and over and over. Also, there's a really, really special point I have to bring up. Special attacks in this game are amazing. This game looks amazing in combat, but just all of the little animations and touches they put into battle are really, really nice. I can't wait for everyone to like see them. It is almost similar, there's not as much detail into them, but it's almost similar to like Showtime attacks in Royal, where every time I had a Showtime attack unlock in Royal, I was excited, whether I'd seen it for the first time or the 100th time, because they just animate so well, they're so fun, like you can feel the personality in all those characters, and I appreciate that even though these were definitely not trying to mimic each other, I really appreciate that Strikers still has that high energy feeling for all of the special attacks, and I'm just really excited excited for people to maybe play as their favorite character and just gush about how much love and attention went into each and all of them. So, we talked about the gameplay, we talked a little bit about the story, we talked a little bit about the technical preferences. Before I wrap up, there's one thing I want to talk about personally on kind of like a side note, just because I know for a lot of people, Persona 5 really stands out because its music definitely has a way of getting its hooks into you, and I'm just so happy that after playing so much of Scramble and looking forward to Strikers, the soundtrack does not disappoint. It was not worked on by the same composers as Persona 5, but the team who works on the soundtracks over at Koei Tecmo and Omega Force killed it. The remixes are insane. The new tracks are insane. Any of the vocals, any of the battle themes, they are instant classics. And the best part is there are so many callbacks, whether it be in the world or in the music. Like, this game has remixes of a Persona 1 song, which is the last thing I would have expected out of a game developed by the Dynasty Warriors team that is the sequel to Persona 5. So just like stuff like that makes me just gush with like how much I love this soundtrack. And man, if they ever made a physical version outside of the Japanese collector's edition, do not sleep on this soundtrack. Please add it to Spotify as soon as this game is out in the West. This is a soundtrack that is just listening to it on loop never, ever gets old. And if you've not played the game, please don't spoil yourself. Playing through the entirety of the story mode, which, might I add, the story mode for me took around 40 to 50 hours without doing that many side quests. So there is hundreds potentially of hours here if you wanted to platinum the game or even do everything in terms of New Game Plus and all the secret optional quests. So this game is definitely not skimping out just because it's an action title. So whatever you do, do not spoil yourself on the story, and especially do not spoil yourself in terms of listening to the music as it's happening in the game. I cannot wait to hear what you all think of the soundtrack and the game once it comes out in February. So, before I wrap up, a little bit of a heads up just in terms of talking about the pre-order bonus stuff. So if you're not aware, in the United States right now we have 2 pre-order incentives, at least physically. As I mentioned, there is a digital deluxe edition on Switch, PlayStation, and Steam. That basically gives you a little bit of DLC items and you get the game 4 days early. Nothing that major. Really not happy about the 4 days early part, but hey, they're trying things. I'm sure fans will be more mad once they realize they have to wait and avoid spoilers on the internet for an extra 4 days. For people who enjoy physical copies of their game, at GameStop, if you pre-order the PlayStation or Switch copy, you get a Joker pen. And at Best Buy, they actually just announced that whether you pre-order on PlayStation 4 or Switch, you will be getting an exclusive Steelbook. So if you pre-order the Switch version, it is going to be a Switch Steelbook. If you pre-order the PlayStation version, it is going to be a Blu-ray size Steelbook. So if you're one of those people like me who are A, obsessed with Steelbooks, and B, obsessed with owning everything, I'm sorry, you're going to have to double dip. But let's be real, if you've already made it this long into a video talking about Persona 5 Strikers, you also might be the kind of person who buys 2 copies of the game just to own it on every platform. Also, let me know in the comments, what are you guys going to play this on? Are you buying it on all 3 systems? Are you buying it digitally? Are you buying it physically? What version is really tempting you? Do you live in Canada and hate yourself because Best Buy Canada, for whatever reason, doesn't want your money, or at least doesn't want to attract your money with Steelbooks because the Best Buy Steelbook in North America is only in the United States? I don't know. It's a weird thing. Best Buy Canada, please change. People would be very happy. Either way, that is basically it for everything I had to say in terms of just kind of selling you on the experience, talking about it's not just a Warriors game, it is an action RPG, it's really fun. I cannot wait till everyone gets their hands on it, but I wanted to kind of open it up to everyone on Twitter and on the SMTN Facebook group, and just ask, what do you want to know about Persona 5 Strikers? And I'm going to answer some of those questions here, so hopefully you find them interesting. So these come from Persona 4 Ever. Why is it that Persona 5 Strikers has less DLC? So I've actually seen this question a lot. Persona 5 Strikers in Japan really only got the Persona tracks where if you pre-order the game, you got music from Persona 1 through 4 that you could add into the battle music rotation. So while I could definitely see them adding to the game in terms of maybe adding more tracks, costumes, like there's no costumes in the game outside of your default, it's really interesting that they haven't really added anything to it. I don't think it's impossible, especially considering how well the game is sold. But I think because the game is so narrative heavy, there's no free mode. If you've ever played a Warriors game, that's definitely a big one. Like, you can obviously go back to different locations. As I mentioned, there's side quests, but it's also single player only. So I think because the game had such a focus on narrative and story, they didn't really want to leave much out in terms of DLC, which is honestly like such a welcome thing, especially if you're an Atlas fan or a Koei Tecmo fan. Like, both of those companies are very, very well known for wanting to get as much money out of you for DLC as possible. So I actually want to applaud Strikers in terms of being respectful of, hey, you paid $60 for this game, we're going to give you a lot of game. Fat Rin says, how easy is the game, and how is the difficulty when the game is on hard? So all the footage you guys are watching for this right now is me being very over-leveled in the first stage on hard, so try not to think that the game is like super baby mode easy. I'm just really, really OP for the area while I was getting footage. So, difficulty-wise, this is actually one of the best balancing jobs for any Koei Tecmo or Atlas game I've ever seen. I played it on normal for the entirety of my first playthrough, and what I thought was so impressive was the fact that it actually was challenging. Bosses were tough. Like, enemies would kill you. Like, end-level bosses, like the big bads, were like a genuine threat, and you had to use items, you had to use strategies. It's definitely a game that's not going to take it easy on you, and if you have to bump it down to easy, there's no punishment for switching around the difficulty at any time, so while I would say it's definitely playable for any kind of range in terms of, are you an action game fan, are you mostly an RPG fan, you'll be able to beat it no problem on easy, but the nice thing is there is a genuine challenge on normal, and along with New Game Plus, there's definitely a lot of room for extra challenge for those people out there who really want to break a sweat. Town Darlin says, how in-depth is the battle system, and the flow from battle to battle? I've played both Hyrule Warriors games, Original and Age of Calamity. Is it similar to those? So what's really interesting about that is the flow is just so different, as I mentioned, because you're going from small cluster of battle very, very quickly. So the battles are smaller. The combat is definitely a mixture of its own. It doesn't feel like you're playing one or the other. It's definitely the newer sense of you have your light, medium, special on top of like your R1 menu, but because those skills attacks are just so different, there's nothing really Warriors-wise you can compare Strikers to. Like, I remember I was listening to a friend talk about he just 100% at Age of Calamity. He's like, oh, I'm a little burnt out on Warriors games, so I'm not sure how excited I am for Strikers. I'm like, it plays nothing like that in terms of the core gameplay loop. So, like, if you're fatigued from playing, like, hundreds of hours of Age of Calamity, do not worry. Strikers is still going to feel like a breath of fresh air. Lorenzo on Twitter says, how does the bond mechanic work? So in Japan, it's called band, and basically what that is there's a leveling up mechanic that can go into different skills, whether it be enemies are more powerful, you have more health, you have more SP, you can get demons more often, you can get more money, you can get discounts in the shop. It basically kind of just works like having skill points, but your skill points are to everyone in the party. It's not just to one character. So think of it as basically like a skill list that you can unlock in any order you want, and just depending on how your gameplay style works. I know for me, I went very, very heavy in terms of I want more SP, because one of the things you'll notice when you start the game off is you have very, very little SP in terms of the amount required for each skill, and it will dry up very quickly. How to Eat Egg on Twitter says, does the game have any good post-game content? It has dozens upon dozens of side missions in the form of requests, which are really, really nice. And on top of that, there is a New Game Plus once you've done everything. If you want to try and get the Platinum, it is a very obtainable Platinum. It just is going to take a lot of time. So I personally have not gotten the Platinum just because I kind of wanted to Platinum it first when it came out in North America, but I would not be surprised if after I Platinum it in North America, going back to the Japanese version and trying to double Platinum it. It's just that fun. There's lots and lots of post-game content. Alright everybody, that is about it for the video. Thank you all so much for listening and watching the video. Let me know what you think. This was a little bit different. It's still obviously kind of my more editorial content, but I wanted to try something a little bit different. As you all know, I've been a huge fan, not only of the Warriors games for a long time, but of Strikers ever since it was announced in Scramble. So I just cannot advocate for this game enough. I'm really excited to start covering it more. I cannot wait till the English release is out. We can all talk about it. I'm going to do a second spoiler cast when it's finally in English so I can actually talk about the story to people. It's been very hard because I have like 4 people I know who have actually beaten this game. So I'm just really excited for it. Let me know what you think. Are you more sold? Are you less sold? Do you have any other lingering questions you still want me to answer? Let me know in the comments below. I will be there chatting with all of you. Thank you again so much. As I mentioned on the podcast, but I haven't really said in a dedicated video, thank you all again. Just cannot thank you all enough for helping me get to 2,000 subscribers by 2021. That was a really, really welcome surprise. So you guys are the best. Appreciate you. Thank you for watching the video. And as always, if you want more videos like this, let me know. Subscribe. Super, super helps. Either way, have a good rest of your weekend, and I will see you all later. Bye.